The Great Purge, also known as the Great Terror, presented by Julia Johnson, Rodney Ingram, Kiana Harris, Joelle Hardaway, Jocelyn Hibbler, Abraham Johnson, and Dante Graydon. Dates. In 1929, Soviet Union leader Vladimir Lenin died. Stalin fought hard and declared a dictatorship in this year. In 1936, the Great Purge began. While the Great Purge was taking place, World War II was also going on. In 1953, Stalin's leadership role ended due to his death. Here we have a map of the Soviet Union. The red lines are displaying the Soviet invasion routes, and the gray area outline is the territory controlled by the Soviet forces during the war in Afghanistan. Then now we have the Russian SFSR, and this is showing you where exactly the purge was taking place. And this is in Georgia, not our Georgia, but the Georgia in Russia. So, who was involved? The main players. The first person who was assassinated was Sergei Kirov, a prominent Bolshevik leader in 1934. Kirov was assassinated by someone named Leonid at the Communist Party headquarters. Although no one knows what the killer role was, they believe Joseph Stalin himself ordered the hit. So after the killing took place and Stalin began his purge, he claimed that there were people against him called the anti-Stalinist communists. So therefore, he then began to kill or imprison anyone he thought to be a party dissenter. With that being done, he ultimately eliminated the original Bolsheviks that participated in the Russian Revolution in 1937. So, someone had convinced Stalin that the Red Army were planning a coup, and in other words, basically they were planning to take Stalin down. So once he heard of this news, he had 30,000 members of the army killed. Yes. And experts believe or estimate that at least 81 of the 103 generals and admirals were executed. So in total, about 1/3 of the Communist Party, 3 million members, were purged. It is believed that at least 750,000 people were killed during this purge. And many experts believe that the number should be at least twice as much. During World War II, Stalin was responsible for the execution of war prisoners, traitors, and especially Polish nationals. Just killing everybody. So, who was Stalin before dictatorship? Stalin was born December 21st, 1879, as a very difficult name that I cannot pronounce. But he changed his name to Joseph Stalin because Stalin represented like a stallion, and a stallion represented power, and he wanted to show himself as a person of power. So he was born in Georgia. He attended a theological seminary where he was expelled for rebelling to speak Russian. He decided to be a Marxist revolutionary, and he had 2 wives and 3 children. In 1922, Stalin was elected as General Secretary of the Communist Party. And after Lenin's death, Stalin took total control, and the Great Purge began in 1934. So, What happened? What is the Great Purge? The Great Purge is a brutal political campaign led by Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin to eliminate dissenting members of the Communist Party and anyone else he considered to be a threat. At least 750,000 people were executed during the Great Purge that took place from 1936 to 1938. As stated earlier, 30 members of the Red Army were executed for planning a coup. The motives. Soviet Union leader Vladimir Lenin, head of the Bolshevik Party, died in 1924. Stalin had to fight his way to political succession, but ultimately declared himself dictator in 1929. The first events of the purge took place in 1934. Yes, with the assassination of Sergei Kirov, a prominent Bolshevik leader. After his death, Stalin launched his purge, claiming that he had uncovered a dangerous conspiracy of anti-Stalinist communists. The purge expanded to include peasants, ethnic minorities, artists, writers, foreigners, basically anyone could get it. Some members of the Bolshevik Party began to question Stalin's authority. Sorry. By the mid 1930s, Stalin believed anyone with ties to the Bolsheviks or Lenin's government was a threat to his leadership and had to go. Stalin began killing or imprisoning anyone who had ties to the original Bolsheviks that participated in the Russian Revolution in 1917. So the Moscow trials, they will be discussed later in later slides, but basically it was Kirov's death led to three widely publicized trials that successfully wiped out many of Stalin's political rivals and critics. Several high-ranking communists were all accused of treason. These were staged events, and the accused admitted to being traitors and spies. So if you were not killed on sight, you were sent to Gulag labor camps. Prisoners of these labor camps commonly died of exhaustion, disease, or starvation. Victims claimed that they would rather be killed than to be sent to endure the torturous conditions at the Gulag labor camps. So, the outcome. After the purge ended, the three widely publicized show trials, the Moscow trials, were unpublicized and held in the Soviet Union during the late 1930s, in which many of the prominent old Bolsheviks were found guilty of treason and executed or imprisoned. So, the first trial was opened in August 1936, and the court found the defendants guilty and ordered their executions. The second trial opened in January 1937, and 4 members were given a 10-year sentence, and the rest of them were executed. That's some more information on them. And the third and final trial was in March 1938. And although one of the defendants retracted his guilty plea, all of the defendants except for 3 were sentenced to death. So the killing did not really end until 1953 when Joseph Stalin finally died. And the end.